Hi, everyone. Welcome to a fresh edition of Marketing Perspective, which is an ADVAN initiative where we bring you the brains behind the brand and marketing industry leaders. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Mr. Ogra, who is the Senior Special Advisor to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on digital and new economy. Interestingly, Mr. Ortega also doubles as the second vice president for the Advertisers Association of Nigeria. So, Mr. Ortega, we're glad to have you join us. How are you doing today?
Glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful program. I think it's very important. It has an important role to play, especially for young people within the industry. Glad to be here.
I mean, you're quite a busy man, because I understand we literally had to reschedule this session for this time. So we're glad to have you on this call.
Thank you for being patient.
Just to set the ball rolling, more like the elevator pitch we have for every guest on this program. We'd like you to share your career journey with us and what led you into marketing and communication strategy in the first place.
So thank you. The career journey, interesting enough, it's sort of disjointed of some sort. Whenever I tell people that I studied public health in school, okay, the next thing they ask me is, how come you studied public health and you're in this field? And because I like to look for trouble sometimes, I say that the best brands and marketing people are actually non-brands and marketing people. And what do I mean by that? I studied public health, but with a major with a minor in behavioral psychology. And what that taught me is understanding the minds of people, especially in groups, at scale. So applying those learnings there is what has basically just guided my entire career journey. Starting out with the German Agency for International Development, where I worked on 5 projects in Northeast Nigeria, on women health, girl child empowerment, access to justice for women and children, and also HIV and reproductive health. And then the crisis happened in the Northeast in 2008, and then I had to sort of relocate back to Lagos. Luckily for me, I was barely, I was barely 20, or getting to 21 when that happened. And I've been given employment right out of school by JC Bank, but I rejected it because nothing in my life or nothing in my past would have ever wanted to work for a bank. But knowing what was going on, I just picked my phone and called them, and they said, "Oh, Tega, how old are you?" I said, "I'm 21. I said, "Okay, as long as you're not 26, you can come, we take an interview and join the training school." And that began my career in, the organized private sector and moving away from the international development space. Whilst the training school, it was very rigorous. You had to score a certain percentage, above a certain percentage across all courses to be able to, work with the bank. And after 3 months, I was able to pass through. But the thing that caught people's eye the most was the fact that every single time they needed someone to do certain things. It could be in terms of writing, it could be in terms of event planning and all that. The chances are that they would put my name forward, even without having to ask. And that continues to happen until when recruiters from different departments in the bank actually came to recruit for their departments when we were leaving training school. And I was in class one day and everyone just came out and said, "Someone looking for you." And I went to see the person, and guess what? The same person who came to meet me at Babcock University where I went to and forced me to take, the aptitude test there. And it says, "Well, everybody's recommending you for a role in our communications and external affairs department because they handle all marketing, brand, and comms for the bank." And it said, "Oh, do you know how to, blog? Do you know how to do websites? Are you conversant with this? How well do you write?" I said, "Yes to all of those things." And that was it. I got there, and that's simple. You have to just be prepared. I learned how to, do little bits of coding. Many years ago, we had this big computer at home, which I used to learn. And then because you actually needed code to actually find your way to where the games are hidden and where the things you don't want your parents to see are hidden. And that was it. At JC Bank, though, it was totally different experience. You had young people fresh out of school who wanted to, pass ideas down, and you had a culture of excellence that the bank seems to have built then.
Mm.
And what we simply did, we simply looked at myself and other young people in that department, simply looked at how we could, pass our ideas across in a way that did not threaten the older generation. And that's where it feels like the bank being on social media, came into play. Because I remember for that, we had opened the social media pages 3 months before we actually launched. Many in the bank's hierarchy were against it because they believed only riffraffs were on social media. But we knew we wanted to do it, and we knew that we did. We were also quite stubborn, And I remember we launching a campaign for 2010, October 1st, 2010, but starting in 2009, which is on the road to 50 for Nigeria's independence anniversary. And after I sent the email to this day with the advert at like 6 p.m., just told me or my colleague, we're actually three that are running this. I said, why don't we do this for BBM? Then it is with BlackBerry Messenger, And then we designed it for BBM. It looked good. We shared it to a few friends in the bank. It actually looked very decent. And post that, we just had everyone saying they wanted it. So we said, why don't we just put it up? So even without approvals, we put up that post on that page. And the numbers didn't lie. In a month, we raised 100,000 followers, 3 months, 200,000 followers. But that's still the same way I approached everything in my career from GT Bank, where we also did other things like GT Create and Danny, not in Danny TV then, just a flip magazine. I went to Wembley Bank where I successfully handled, the bank's rebranding exercise and repositioning exercise, which was launched May 2nd, 2015. And then I quit. And I was adopted to join Boa Group as Director of Corporate Communications, where I worked for the past, I think about 9 years before, the president appointed me as Senior Special Assistant on Digital Communications and New Media Engagement Strategy.
I mean, it's been quite an interesting journey. And if I was to hazard a guess, I never would have thought, someone with your communication background of some sort studied public health as a course in the university. So just as a writer, the initial question that I ask is just to understand what was that watershed moment? What was like the turning point in your career? What was that period where you can say it was a defining moment of your journey into communication and marketing?
For me, I find it difficult to pick one, but two actually stand out, and I'll try to be as brief as possible with them. And they were both crisis situations. The first one was when the banking industry shakeup happened, and you had 2 new generation banks shut down. And all of a sudden, at JC Bank then, we started having queues in our branches that were extending to the roads, and they'll put queue ropes on the roads across many branches. And that presented a very big challenge, to those of us in the communication and external affairs team. And what was the challenge? JC Bank was a bank that built themselves around 8 orange rules, as we called it then. But I don't think at any point in time that the kind of service we were getting in places like Intercontinental or Oceanic Bank, where you go to the till and you get your funds out in 3 minutes, we never built a promise around that. Instead, you were given the most excellent customer service, no matter how long it took, that you never even remember the time. So you had customers coming in who wanted 3-minute service, and our core customers who were probably bringing, 80% of the funds in the bank, couldn't enjoy that service anymore. So it was part of the strategy that we looked at, move them out of the banking or into that core retail customers into our online platforms, and then for the mid-level and internet, use those same online platforms to, project the brand to them, whilst we find things like private banking and everything. The bank moved from 390,000 customers to 2.9 million in, I think, about a year or two, which was larger than what the bank was ever prepared for. But how that was handled, and the roles that we played, despite the fact that we're very young, brand execs then, it made me believe that as long as you could test the validity of your projects, your ideas, whatsoever, as long as you have one or two people that believe in you, you could always get it done, with or without support. And that sort of just gave me the much needed boost I needed for most of my career, because at 24, I was already heading the corporate communications function, at Wemi Bank. And that came with its own challenges. So this was a bank that was transitioning, from being an old bank to a new bank. It was the oldest indigenous Nigerian bank. And how does someone, mid-level exec, have a role where it's responsible for, the brand fortunes of the entire bank? And that was quite interesting, but we did it. First working day of 2011, we had a fire at the bank. 2012, sorry. We had a fire at the bank. All our servers and data centers got burnt. The entire building was basically flames. And we had to, basically within minutes of the fire happening, as they were evacuating us, because we knew how detrimental that was to our capital, raising program, where to raise 25 billion to become a national bank then. We knew how dangerous that was. So those plans, we had to set up a team right there opposite the bank in the car park. As we're walking downstairs, I carried my laptop with me in one hand, even though you shouldn't do that in the fire. And we set out. And what we did then was continuously give updates every moment, every single thing, no matter how mundane it was. But that singular action, huge trust with us, with all our stakeholders, customers, the media, and everything. And for the first time, I didn't see anyone who was willing to, make a buck from someone else's misfortune. And some of the relationships I've also built across my career, and that are still the relationships I hold here today. These relationships have never failed me. They're not transactional in nature, it's just based on value. And value will always, like I always say, value will always sell itself.
Absolutely.
So those two things are clear, they shape my perspective on how, to move around and to work and to collaborate within the industry.
That's interesting to note. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now that we're delving into crisis management proper, so the next question I'm going to be asking you is, what are the most effective crisis management strategies that should be integrated into a brand's overall marketing plan? And how do you think a brand can proactively identify these early warning signs to prevent crisis? I know that to a large extent, you can't, for a fact, completely predict how these things are going to happen. But as a business, how can you potentially ensure that these crises are prevented or they're better managed?
So for those who might be listening to this, I'll speak from two sides. I'll try not to be as technical and speak from experience and seeing what has consistently worked over time in my own, career, as well as those around me. A crisis will always happen, and every business must be willing to accept that fact. It's an inalienable truth. A crisis will always happen. The difference, what separates brands that successfully navigate crisis and those that don't, so those that do and fail immediately after, is planning and preparation. I always say two things I require when I consult for people, two things I require them to do, especially around crisis management, is one, have a crisis management team in place, regardless of whether you have a crisis or not. That includes having a crisis, a crisis management plan. It's basically part of your business process, your business processes. It's very important. And then two, you need to have someone or whoever is heading the communications or brands marketing function, depending on how your business is structured, on the planning table at all times. And why do I say that? For as long as the person who you place the life of the organization in his hands or in his pen or his laptop or whatsoever, not on that table, that planning table, where you guys are discussing strategy, you're discussing the business, you're discussing future plans, you're discussing the past, your results and all that. As long as that person is not there, in a crisis, there's very high likelihood that the person will falter because he has limited resources to form or to have a holistic view of the business and what should be or what should not be done. So for as long as that's not done, it'll be extremely difficult, for people to navigate that crisis. So once the two things are done, it's easy peasy from there. The next thing, you just ask for what do they need to have in place, right?
Yeah.
The next thing I would say, post having your crisis management plan and everything, is to then templatize things. Look at your business, do an in-depth audit of your business. What can go wrong? You have to keep asking yourself that question. What can go wrong? How do we either mitigate, because prevention, they say, is always better than cure. How can we mitigate those things that go wrong from going wrong, or those things that may go wrong or can't go wrong from going wrong? And once you've put those mitigation activities in place, your focus might now shift to other things. So that audit is important, in building the crisis management plan. Once you do that, you have more clarity. It's easier for you to, isolate things that might actually be detrimental to the business, huge and detrimental to the business, for your crisis management plans. And then you just have templates that you use to run through these things as part of your plan. One thing that I've also noticed is a lot of people don't know, what if this crisis happens unexpectedly, something that is unplanned for? That's a major question, that we always get. What if this crisis is unplanned for? So the question that people ask is, what do you do when, crisis happens unexpectedly? My number one rule, keep calm. As a proper brand manager or crisis manager, or a crisis management team, depending on what structure your organization has, the last thing you want to do is to be the person panicking in the room when everyone else is panicking. You need to be able to focus fully in those moments when crises happen unexpectedly. You need to say, oh, what went wrong here? You need to be able to get to the root cause of it as quickly as possible. And you also need to be able to, think 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of anyone. And this is where a crisis management plan comes in place as part of the business processes and business continuity plans. Once certain things happen, there is a set of rules based on your organization's structure, based on the way it works, for you to follow. That takes away 30 to 40% of the work. Every other thing is as things go, but guided around the same, structures you're following. Once you can identify if this falls within any framework you already have, plug it in there. You have 3, 4, 5, outcomes or outputs that you want to do. If you have an approval process that's outside that business, continuity thing, then you need to be able to, as quickly as possible, activate all those chains of command. Because the worst thing that can happen in most crises, not all crises, there are some crises where you need to keep quiet. But the worst thing that can happen in most crises is not being transparent enough or not having the semblance of transparency. Transparency will buy you points where propaganda can never get you. You see, transparency, even when things go wrong, being transparent and accountable in a crisis, when things go wrong, despite the fact that you have a higher likelihood of being forgiven by either your shareholders, or your customers, or whoever the stakeholders may be, or even the media. But if you don't do that, if you're not as transparent and you fail, then that's a corporate risk. It's a huge reputational risk to the business. So you always have to be on the lookout for those pitfalls because it's hard up. But the most important thing is to remain calm in such situations.
Thank you so much for that response. There's something you mentioned that I think is quite fundamental, which is the fact that you almost cannot avoid crisis. It's about making sure that you have proper plans and we're prepared towards that. I mean, because I'm trying to cast my mind back to a business I used to manage back in the days, I think about 7 years ago. We just had a new product launch, and I think till this probably remain one of the most successful campaigns that the brand has done. So it was a new product that was launched into the market, and then we had some kind of marketing campaigns behind it, and it was quite successful. And then from nowhere, there was a social media backlash, which was around the fact that the brand, I mean, it was tagged as a campaign that was marketing insensitive. So the idea was the payoff of that brand is not exactly suited for those markets, an African market. And the way the brand responded to the social media backlash, I think it started from Ghana by a very popular musician there, where it was saying, how can a brand have, I don't want to mention the payoff, but I mean, for the sake of this conversation that we're having, how can you have a USP that says for visibly fairer skin in a market like her? So you're essentially promoting what you're not supposed to promote in this market. So I really like what you said about making sure that you're well prepared and you plan towards this, because you almost cannot avoid having crisis. So it's about making sure that you have a team, you very well prepare for this. Which then leads me to the next question, which is around, I mean, social media today is a thing, right? And I mean, you're just one little click away from, what they call virality, and a brand getting sort of the short end of the stick in terms of social media campaigns. So the question I'd like to ask you is, how can a brand navigate potential social media challenges or backlash?
If I said the crisis will always occur for the generality of marketing, and organizations and whatsoever, on social media, a crisis is 5 times or 10 times more even likely to occur. Yeah. It is what it is. Don't be deceived that, even the best thought out plans and campaigns, like you just said, if a lot of people are looking for virality, they do not care how they get it. Some people, just for the fun of it, will jump on your brand, on your campaign, on individuals that represent the organization, or someone can just do something somewhere is linked to the organization, and that's, puts an end to every single sensible thing or every single rule in the book that you have followed to get your campaign right. So just expect it. That's the first thing. But, when you talk of prevention, sometimes, because again, as I know I discussed it earlier, but see, prevention does not necessarily mean doing everything right. Sometimes prevention can be as simple as, ensuring that you do not deviate in your everyday interactions on social media from what your brand stands for. What is your brand ethos? What do what's are you reflecting? What should people see you as? And I'll use myself as a personal example. Coming into this role, a lot of people know me by name, they've never met me in person. And a lot of people didn't know that, I'm actually very politically conscious and active. So coming into this role, I have people, paying influencers every week, to sort of make a mess of me, my name, my work, and everything. But I stood my guns. I had a plan. I had a plan that my principal had bought into. I had a plan that I was setting would work. And I stuck to it. I never got involved in, responding to them. Going back to what I said earlier about, it's not all crisis responsive. But it wasn't that I didn't want to respond. I was biding my time until I saw someone who made a comment, but had the sufficient skill for me, an influence for me to use as, a teaching moment. So I basically used that person's statement towards me and used it to teach or to express every single thing I was doing, lay out my plan, lay out why it's necessary, lay out why it wasn't going to be the way they wanted. And that was what the game changer. From that moment on, we had a lot of people move neutral. They didn't become positive. They weren't looking to, they didn't like me. but they moved neutral. And after a very short while, when they could now see why I said what I wanted to do, and because there was something they could look back to, it was very, very easy, for me to now start winning them over. So the time difference between when you respond or if you choose not to respond might not be the same as mine. Sometimes you have to respond immediately because any negative thing that stays on your brand for too long can actually be detrimental to the brand itself. So you do not want those to stay. Those you have to fix and attend to immediately.
What are the best practices?
I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach.
Absolutely.
In terms of best practices, you need to understand, like I said, the first thing you do in any crisis situation is understanding the situation itself. Where's this coming from? What are the root causes? Is this something that can be fixed immediately? Is this something that needs, another level of remediation or something? You have to keep asking questions. But the most important thing is having that, crisis management plan or business continuity plan that guides you. It doesn't have to be anything complex. Sometimes it's just a set of rules. If this situation happens, a situation that look like this, what should we do? How should we go about it? You can start with some very basic plans like that. You can check online and download, very basic ones. Or if you need something very, very, something that will speak to your brand, will speak to every single value that your brand has, then you need to go even much more in depth. If you need to get consultants, you get them. If you have teams of people, that can do that in-house, let them do that. But it's important that you have a team managing your crisis and sits down there, because all situations, no matter how unique they look, actually different by brand. What a brand A might be forgiven for is not what brand B might be forgiven for, even if they're in the same business, they have the same size and everything. Because customers would always see you differently. So it's very important, you must be prepared, you must have your plans on ground, you must be very nimble when crises occur. Don't be straight-jacketed by your crisis management plan or your business continuity plan. No, if you need to adapt, once the crisis is happening, be ready to adapt. But make sure you carry the necessary levels of approvals as a brand manager. Make sure you carry them, along. That's very, very important. But it's something that a lot of people miss. They think sometimes because you have a blanket approval to do something, but you fail to look at the nuances of the situation as it's happening. And then you fail to see that some things in crisis management plan might not actually work, even though the situation is perfectly described there. So you must always be on the alert for nuances that might change outcomes of whatever planning, whatever strategy you're implementing in the crisis. It's very, very important to do that. And then post that, you need to always keep sharing information. A lot of people are afraid to do that, especially when the crisis occurs, because they don't want to say the wrong thing. But it's better to share factual, accurate information, appear transparent, than not so. When you don't share, you open yourself up, to misinterpretation. You open up yourself up to people taking your narrative away from you, which is something you always want to avoid. You open yourself up to, crisis down the line, other crisis down the line as a result of not properly situating the crisis that you had and fixing it when you have to fix it. So it's a very delicate dance, and practice makes perfect. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to have a crisis. Don't be afraid to face a crisis heads on. But the learnings from there would also help improve your ability as a brand or as the professional managing a crisis to manage the next one better.
Thank you so much for that feedback. You did mention it's not a one-shoe-fits-all approach when it comes to crisis management. It then brings me to the next question, which is, what are the key metrics we use or you believe businesses should use to evaluate success of crisis management efforts? And how exactly do these, metrics inform future strategies? You did mention earlier that when it comes to how a brand responds to crisis, it is not a one-shoe-fits-all approach. But when it comes to what we consider as the success factors, are there specific metrics brands or businesses need to look at?
So, I guess specific metrics.
Yes.
It depends on what you're looking for. At the end of the day, you're planning to pre-crisis. The crisis could be anything. It could be financial or whatsoever. It could be reputational. You're planning for that. The crisis happens, you put your plan in motion, you're responding, looking at whether you should respond as quickly as you should. If you have a crisis management plan in place, some of these things, some crisis management plans would have, time frames within which to respond to, or to give a response based on the level allocated to that of crisis, that you have at that point in time. You do that, then you also, during the crisis, you're also looking at, are you speaking to people in the way they ought to be spoken at that point in time? Does the communication, reflect transparency? Does it show empathy, depending on what kind of crisis it is? Are you actually speaking to the people the way they ought to be spoken to? Is your communication clear and consistent? These are things that you also need to have metrics to track individually through the entire cycle of your crisis communication activities. So it's not about whether the crisis successfully, managed the perception of the brand. No, it's the little things that make up the big. So every single step in your crisis management plan must be seriously evaluated post-crisis. From preparing for a crisis before the crisis itself happens, to the points where you're looking at stakeholder communications immediately and after the crisis happens, and the rest, and the crisis in itself as a whole. So you must measure every single thing, because you might be able to successfully, mitigate or clear a crisis, but you might not have the opportunity. So I was saying that, you might have the best laid plans in place. You might do everything you need to do. People might think that, oh, you have successfully managed a crisis. But at the end of the day, those individual plans that you have, those individual things that make up the crisis, there might be a gap somewhere there. As long as those gaps are not addressed, you might not be second time lucky. So for instance, I see a lot of brands, and it happens quite often, especially in the financial services industry. You're beginning to see it in the gaming space also. I'm the betting and gaming space in Nigeria now. They are actually, a lot of them are highly caustic when they respond to their customers, when customers believe that they have a crisis that is related to the bank services. And you can see it in the ease at which people are looking to move banks from one bank to the other these days. I personally know how many banks have moved.
Yeah.
And it's not because, oh, they're not offering me the financial services that I need. They're offering it well. But more often than not, it's the manner in which issues I've had, or what I consider crisis to me as an individual, not even the bank now. So for instance, about 3-4 banks have had issues with their core banking applications over the past few weeks. I have not seen anyone that's successfully spoken to that crisis situation in a way that doesn't make them look less than irresponsible. For the most part, a lot of their efforts have been so casual. You get the odd email here and there. It's not until you start seeing negatives in the media that they are forced to respond. And I'm not trying to call any names there, but this behavior is something that we are seeing increasingly across, the financial services sector in Nigeria, as well as, others. And I think it's something we have to watch out for. I was sitting down with someone and they said something like, there's a reflection of our values. You have to question about social media at the time. And the person said it's a reflection of the value system that we have. But as a corporate, as a brand, you can never get tired of doing things the right way. If you don't, that's the crisis in itself. So remember what I said, every single step in managing the crisis has to be thoroughly evaluated post-crisis. And during the crisis itself, you also have to keep, what's the word? You have to keep being able to adapt as necessary.
Adapt. Thank you so much for this, Ortega. Thank you once again for sharing your invaluable expertise with us. We've been able to cover some critical aspects of crisis management and how brands or businesses can stay ahead into these ever-evolving, marketing environments or marketing landscape. Thank you once again. And to Our teaming audience, I hope you found today's discussion with Ortega very insightful. Like you rightly mentioned, let's remember managing a brand's reputation in the digital age isn't just about reacting to crisis, but also preparing and learning from them to grow stronger as a business. Once again, Ortega, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for making our time for this session. We know you're a very busy man.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for your time. And thanks to ADVAN for once again for inviting me on this.
So until next time, my name is Adiola. Stay ahead and stay informed. Bye, everyone.